guys, it's Josephine, and I'm gonna be reviewing the Bane Chronicles, what really happened in Peru. I'm gonna be doing all the Shadowhunters series in chronological order, and since Bane Chronicles, what really happened in Peru is the first one, that's what we're starting with. So before I start with this review, I just wanted to say those are just my personal opinions about this book, and if you disagree, and if you have different opinions about it, then by all means, share them with me in the comments, and you're entitled to your own opinions, just like I'm entitled to mine when it comes to this book. I felt like that disclaimer was really necessary, since my opinions about this book are gonna be quite negative, as you're soon gonna find out. And let me tell you, it's kind of a mess. There's no coherent plot. It didn't feel entertaining or engaging, especially not as much as the other books in the series. There were only a few moments that I thought were funny or engaging or entertaining. A lot of the details get glossed over, especially a lot of the important details that would have helped ground this story and made it feel more alive. The whole thing just feels extremely flat and just the worst sin of all that Cassandra could have committed. Boring. So because of that, I would have to give it a rating of like 2 stars out of 5. And overall, the only reason why I got through it was, to be honest, because I set out on this task of getting through all of them, and so I felt like I had to. If that was not the case, I would have given up on it after like the first couple of pages. So now, with my initial thoughts and feelings about this book out of the way, I want to go more in depth into what actually happened in this book. So this book is basically about our main character, Magnus Bane, who is a warlock. Warlocks within the Shadowhunters universe are special. They possess magical abilities, they do not look human, especially not without their glamours. For example, Magnus Bane has cat eyes, one of his friends, Ragnar, has blue skin, and so on and so forth. They're half humans, half demons, and they also live forever, and they cannot have their own children. I wish there was more information about their magical systems, their powers, their cost of using their powers, what are the limitations on their powers. I think it would have been interesting to delve more into kind of how the warlock magic system functions, especially since this book is actually focused on warlocks. But we never really get to have any of that, because that's just not as important as Magnus's romance stories, which aren't even that well developed in it. The setting takes place in Peru from 1791 to 1962. The setting being in 1791 does not really work too well because of the way that the characters talk, the way that the characters act. It just does not feel like it's the time period. The dialogue feels way too modern, and the attitudes that characters have towards Magnus's sexuality also feels too modern. Back then, Magnus being bi was supposed to be a way bigger deal, but Magnus does not feel bad about it, which I guess because he's a warlock it could be different, but for Magnus's boyfriend who's human, it's supposed to be a big deal. He's supposed to feel ashamed about it. His parents, his family, is supposed to have some sort of a negative reaction about it, but there's only just like one sentence dedicated to the whole topic. One. And I do feel like it's sort of a missed opportunity for Cassandra to have that discussion and to have that theme of how it used to be back then for people who were sexual minorities. Magnus's whole sexuality just feels like it was sort of slapped on him without much thought of how it would affect his character in that historical context. So now I'm gonna try my best to go over the actual plot of the story. And this is gonna be a challenge because there is no plot. You just have a bunch of scenes thrown in together. Originally, I wanted to summarize the whole plot and go point by point, but then I realized that that was just gonna be way too long and too boring and too repetitive, because you have a bunch of scenes that basically don't connect with each other, that are just jumbled up together, and going over them, each one line by line, is just gonna be a torturous task that I just don't want to subject you guys to. So instead, I'll just sort of go over the gist of it, about what happened, and touch upon some important points pretty quickly and talk about the scene that I actually liked, the parts of the scenes that I did not like, and sort of do it that way instead of going the traditional plot review scene by scene, because here I don't feel like it makes as much sense because there is no real plot and the scenes are just jumbled up together anyways. The plot is supposed to be about Magnus's adventures in Peru. And I'm saying supposed to be because there aren't actually that many adventures. And when you're supposed to have an adventure, the book sort of just conveniently jumps over it and has a time jump. For example, right after Magnus, Katarina, and Ragnar agreed that they would go on adventures in 1885, you have a 5-year time jump. What happened in those 5 years? We don't know. What adventures did they go on? We don't know. Hey, maybe it would have been interesting for us to know what happened in those 5 years. But nope. No, Cassandra is not gonna write about that. So it just feels like they sat around for 5 years doing nothing. And maybe that's how warlocks actually act because they are immortal. I'm not immortal, so I don't know. But it sure feels weird and boring to jump over the part about adventures when the book is supposed to be about adventures, since that is what it continues saying all the time that they're supposed to be going on and doing. But then we don't actually get to read about them going and doing those things because that's just not as important for Cassandra to talk about than Magnus's relationships, which don't even feel that well developed to begin with. One of my only favorite scenes was Magnus's drunk scene. And to be honest, probably the only reason why I really liked it was because I'm a huge fan of drunk scenes. I sort of find them funny. Basically, after Magnus's breakup with his boyfriend, Magnus feels extremely upset, and so he ends up wallowing in self-pity and getting really drunk, and then he just does a bunch of cool things that a drunk warlock would do while being drunk. And what I like about it is that there is a time jump from when he started drinking to when he wakes up in the morning. I like how that works because it sort of emphasizes how he forgot everything that happened last night, and then Katarina basically retells the story of all of his drunken debauchery that he got up to the night before. I think that scene is genuinely funny and works kinda well. And that's pretty much the only scene in this 40-page book that I liked. And now I'm gonna talk about scenes that I did not like. One of the scenes that I did not like was the one that happened in 1962 when Magnus meets Kitty and the photographer from National Geographic. Magnus and Kitty, they run away together and decide that they're gonna start a life of magical crime. And here's why I do not like that scene. It has one of my biggest pet peeves as far as tropes go, and that is the love at first sight runs away with the man trope. Kitty decides to run away with Magnus for no real reason. She just sees him, she meets him for the first time, and she's like, yeah, sure, I'm just gonna run away with this random man. I don't know who he is, he might be dangerous, hell, he might want to kidnap me for all I know, but I'm just gonna run away in this location that I don't even know all too well because I'm just madly in love with him. That's really not how love works, Cassandra. I'm sorry. And I really do not like this trope because not only is it unrealistic, but it also sets unrealistic standards when it comes to love, and it makes some readers, very unfortunately, think that that is how actually love works. And then the second thing that I do not like about this whole scene is that the two of them decide to go on this adventure of magical crime, and then we never actually get to experience what those adventures are because the books just insist on being boring and skipping over anything that might have been potentially interesting. And then another scene that I do not like, Magnus's relationship with his boyfriend Imasu. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Magnus falls head over heels with Imasu in Peru. The two of them decide to settle down together and have this wonderful life together, and their relationship seems to be going well. Until one day, Imasu decides, I didn't want to date him anymore, and their breakup scene just feels so clunky, and it's just not clear why Imasu has this complaints, why Imasu says what he says. There was no lead up to it. It's really not clear why Imasu thinks Magnus is not permanent or feral or glittery or like any of those things. And the reason for that is because we did not see much of their relationship. So when the breakup comes along, it's just like, what the hell, where did it come from type of moment. And not like in a good way, but in a really badly executed way. And then Magnus's response is not much better. The whole dialogue just feels so clunky and so like I wish it was written better. And this whole scene could have worked. This whole romance could have worked had it been described better, had it been described in more detail, had we actually known more about their relationship. But because we don't, the whole thing just sort of feels really out of nowhere and really weird, and really Imasa's motivations as a character is just so unclear. So to summarize, the biggest issues were that there was no central conflict, no coherent plot, and most scenes I just frankly didn't like. The only one that I liked was the drunken scene, and the whole romance thing that Magnus was on I did not like when it comes to Masu, and I did not like when it comes to Kitty. I did not like it when it comes to Kitty because it was problematic. I did not like it when it comes to Masu just because it was not well executed. So hence my harsh rating of 2 stars out of 5. I really hope you guys enjoyed this review, and till next time, goodbye.